as well. So we'll find out after the meeting is over if they do discuss Haiti or they just talk about voting. But we're going to move on now and bring in Dr. Neely Fuller Jr., Dr. Francis West Welsing's mentor. Neely Fuller Jr., welcome back to WOL Radio. How are you doing, sir?
I'm still learning.
And we love to hear that because you know a lot and you're still learning. Let me just tell the folks, too, that Neely Fuller Jr. uses logic to prove his points. So whenever you got to listen really, really keenly. It's not one of these that you can kind of listen and do something else. You got to get your ear all the way into that speaker to understand what he's saying, because he's going to tell you about how the system of racism, white supremacy works. And he says if you don't understand how it works, the system works, and all that it entails and everything else you think you understand will only serve to confuse you. So Neely Fuller Jr., there's been a lot of talk in the news about critical race theory. And I want to get your thoughts on critical race theory. How's it, how it really stacks up against what you teach a lot about racism, white supremacy?
Well, I don't really teach, but I give my opinion because I don't know enough to teach. But I have written a book called The Compensatory Code for Victims of White Supremacy, which I say is racism, the only kind that really matters. And so I say in this book, the first thing you do when you hear anybody use a term you haven't heard before, there are two questions, maybe one before the other or the second one before the first one, whichever order you want to put them in. But there are two questions that are absolutely crucial to ask when you hear a term that you're not familiar with. So critical race theory fall in what I call my own code, or the code of logic, which is really, I don't have a monopoly on that. I don't have a monopoly on logic. Just follow logic. If I hear something I've never heard before, what is the logical question to ask about what I am hearing? So if it's a term I've never heard before, the logical question is, what does the term mean? And after I get an answer, because you never move to the second question before you get an answer to the first one. That's a part of what I call codified or logical thinking. Then I just simply say, what does that term mean? Critical race theory. Then, after I get an answer to that question, I ask, who invented the term? And I don't want any explanation of the term from anybody except the person who invented the term. Because the person who invented the term should know why they invented the term. And can tell you all about it, because the inventor, if someone invents an airplane, I want to talk to the inventor if I just want to get the straight information about that airplane that was invented by this particular person, this particular type of aircraft. Talk to the inventor. And then any questions that you have. But I have not been able to find anybody who has told me who invented the term.
All right. Well, let me fill you in here. Neely Fuller Jr., I hope his phone hasn't dropped. The person is
everybody who hears about it, and all these, everybody who's got 5 or 6 PhDs, they will have asked somebody somewhere who invented the term after they find out what does the term mean, or vice versa.
All right. Let me help you out, because you sent me. I did some homework when we talked about this. The critical race theory. Kimberly Crenshaw. She's a professor at UCLA, law professor, Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, UCLA and Columbia. And she says that critical race theory is not a diversity and inclusion training, but a practice of interrogating the role of race and racism in society that emerged in the legal academy and spread to other fields of scholarship. She's the one who coined the term CRT, if you will. She notes that CRT is not a noun, but a verb. It cannot be confined to a static and narrow definition, but is considered to be an evolving, malleable practice. It critiques how the social construction of race and institutionalized racism perpetuate racial caste system that regulates people of color to the bottom tiers. CRT also recognizes that race intersects with other identities, including sexuality, gender identity, and others. CRT recognizes that racism is not a bygone relic of the past. Instead, it acknowledges that the legacy of slavery, segregation, and the imposition of second-class citizenship on black Americans and other people of color continue to permeate the social fabric of this nation. That's her definition.
Now, that definition, it appears to be, because I couldn't keep up with it, it appears to be, what, about 2 or 3 paragraphs long? Is it 1 paragraph?
Actually 3. You're correct.
3 paragraphs. And they're pretty long paragraphs, it seems like. Does it seem that way to you? I mean, you know.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've heard the definition or the name of the person that invented it.
Right.
So you say it's about 3 paragraphs.
Right. It's about 3 paragraphs, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't know how to respond to that without studying every word that is said, because that's what I call the compensatory counter-racist requirement. You have to have clarity and focus. I would have to sit down probably and study those 3 paragraphs for at least a week or 2 to really be able to digest what it's supposed to mean. And I still might have some questions about it, about what it's supposed to mean. And what I'm supposed, and then my third question, since I now have Miss Crenshaw, you say, and is that lady classified as white or non-white?
Non-white.
She's classified as non-white. Okay. Which means automatically, according to the code, I could not criticize, since the first word in there is critical, but if you expand that into criticize, I am completely, right off the bat, according to counter-racist logic, which is what I always go by. That's why I say we need a code. The code does not allow me to criticize anything that a non-white person says about race, racism, or counter-racism, because that comes under what a term that I invented called VGQ, Victims Guaranteed Qualification. She's qualified to say anything she wants to say as a victim of white supremacy about race, racism, or counter-racism, meaning being against racism. So, but I could look at it, get an understanding of what it means, and then see, like what I'm hearing, tentatively, that a lot of white people are upset about the theory. So now I have a question about what are they upset about? What part of it, of that definition that she has presented, that they are upset about? And then I just have one question after another toward any white person who would, you might say, challenge or object to what she's saying. But I would have no objection to what she's saying because counter-racist codification logic does not allow me to. Victims guaranteed qualification. She's qualified as a victim to say anything that she wants to say about race, racism, or counter-racism. According to what? According to logic. A codified counter-racist logic. That's logical. Victims of anything that has to do with mistreatment can say anything about what they perceive as being their mistreatment that they want to say. Everybody should have that, not just a so-called quote-unquote right, but a duty to say. Might not be able to have a duty to do anything, just any old thing. Doing is something else. But to make comments or invent terms that describe what they perceive as their victimization, oh, you got that. And some people have problems with even using the term victim, but they don't have a problem with it when they are victims of a robbery, of which black people all over the world are victims of robberies, and racism being one of the biggest robbery systems ever invented, if not the biggest, the most efficient, for sure. Just as an example.
You know, I think at the end of the last sentence, it probably sums it up. She says, it acknowledges that the legacy of slavery, segregation, and the imposition of second-class citizenship on black Americans and other people of color continue to permeate the social fabric of this nation. And that's what it was. I think that's what the issue that white folks are upset with.
Okay, well, they can take it up with her. That should be the correct procedure. If they got anything that I say, I've written a book where I talk about the system of white supremacy blatantly, almost on every page, in 400 pages of one volume and another over 400 pages in the other volume. I talk about the system of white supremacy. I've heard that term systemic racism that somebody objects to. Well, I'm one of the people who are saying that, and I'll say it 1,000,000 times over and justify saying it by any school of logic, just using logic, not being bombastic or anything like that, but just what I mean by using logic, ask questions about what the person objects to and why they're objecting to it. Because I say the system of white supremacy needs to be replaced with the system of justice. Now, anybody on the planet, anywhere, with any kind of badge, any kind of position, any kind of whatever you might, scholarship, school of theology or whatever, have an objection to that. I have a question. Your objection based on what? Because I want to hear it. Your objection based on what?
So let me jump in here for a second, Neely Fuller Jr., because you're saying racism and white supremacy needs to be replaced by a system of justice?
Yes, I simply say, if any black person sitting in any kind of college or institution within the range of my voice right now, or who is intended to attend one, or who is just going to high school, they can always say, replace the system of white supremacy with the system of white supremacy in capital letters, because it's a government. That's the only government you're talking about. You're not talking about the government of America or the government of this or that or Madagascar or no. No. The government, the system of white supremacy is a government. It governs people. Government just means you govern people. You tell people what to do and they better do it. That's government. So the system of white supremacy, when it comes to black people, is the most powerful government on the planet Earth here in the year 2021. Now, I either lied or I told the truth. No government is more powerful than the system of white supremacy when it comes to black people. None. So that's another thing. You don't mix that up according to what I have written. That word America is not to appear nowhere in there, because America has nothing to do with the mistreatment of black people, if you go by the definition of America. See, that's why I'm saying it's real important that every word that you use be studied like you would study an amoeba, like you would study a cicada. And you want to know everything that there is about a cicada. I mean, where a cicada goes. I mean, what's this 17-year thing about and all like that. Every word should be examined like that. When you start talking about racism, you examine every word. You don't skip over any words. And I'd like for everybody to catch on to that, particularly all the people who are in what you call academia. That's teachers and students and whatnot. Pay attention to every word that somebody utters to you ever that has anything remotely to do with race, racism, and or counter-racism. Why? Because we need clarity, and we need focus, and we need logic, which is something that's almost entirely missing from discussions about race. Logic, clarity. Clarity means you got definitions that everybody can understand. Because if you got definitions that nobody understands, including the definition of America, how many people can define what America is and what America isn't? I mean, actual to define it. What I say in the textbook that I write is that you can't mix America up with racism for the simple reason and the logical reason America doesn't exist in reality. It's a concept. It's something that people are trying to bring into existence. It's something that and I'm on record for this, all the way, I would like to see America brought into existence. Because what is an American?
All right. Hold that thought right there, Neely Fuller Jr. We're going to take a quick break. I'll let you explain about America on the other side. Folks, you want to join this conversation with Neely Fuller Jr. discussing critical race theory and racism, white supremacy? Hit us up at 800-450-7876 right here on FM 95.9 and AM 1450. WOL, where information is power.
This check on traffic sponsored by Cox, bringing us closer. Police activity shuts down 11th Street and Northwest in both directions. Between East Street and Pennsylvania Avenue, police are now redirecting traffic there. Still looking at delays off and on along DC 295 North from the 11th Street Bridge up to East Capitol. Southbound delays continue coming down from the DC line from Eastern Avenue down to East Capitol. There's a collision.
Fuller Jr. and then call up a friend and tell him that Neely Fuller Jr. is on the radio explaining racism, white supremacy, also talking about the critical race theory. And as I mentioned, you've got to listen very, very keenly. He uses logic to explain his pronouncements. 800-450-7876. If you don't get it, raise your hand. He'll answer you. But before we left, Neely Fuller Jr., you were telling us about the definition of America. So I'll let you finish on that thought.
Yes, this is very important because in discussions about race, you often hear the word America. And the word America is completely alien. Completely alien. Nowhere close, nowhere in the neighborhood associated with racism or counter-racism. Racism doesn't come up anywhere on that radar in the context of America, because when you're talking about America, you're talking about one thing, not a whole bunch of things. You're talking about one, just one. And what is that one thing? People. Not land, not a rock, not an eagle. There's no such thing as an American eagle. There's no such thing as an American flag. This is all in people's heads. People's heads. So you're talking about people. Even the Constitution says, we the people. What people? Okay? And then we talk about a more perfect union. A more perfect union? How can you get to be more perfect? So what are we talking about here? So when you say America, I understand the root word for America came from a person whose first name was Amerigo. And that person was a writer. So you're talking about Amerigo, a person who was a writer, a journalist, or a newspaper person? When you say America, are you talking about him, one person? So what is America? America, the only logical explanation, the only logical definition. So I gave it one in 1994. Because I said, no definition you will find in any dictionary or encyclopedia for an American makes any sense at all. None of them. Because I was looking for a way to use the word and not misuse it, in order to get clarity and understanding. But in 1994, I started wrestling with it and say, I'm going to find a definition somewhere in some encyclopedia, in something. I'm going to go and look at everything meticulously with a fine-tooth comb. Everywhere I see American used, they say American flag. They call a football player an All-American. Now, if a football player is an All-American, how does that differentiate from just a plain American, if there is such a thing as a plain American, average American, sub-American, American all over the place, none of it making sense. So in 1994, I think it was about, I came up with what I call a compensatory definition for America that will hold up and stand the test of time, and if anybody comes up with a better one, I'll adopt it. Because you always want to go with the best. But here it is. An American is, by definition, a person. That's number one. A person. Not a rock, not an eagle, not a flag, not a statue. An American is a person. And a person that does what? Because an American must do something different from people who are not Americans. So what will be that difference? See, here's where it really gets. What makes an American different from someone who is not an American? So this compensatory definition, I think most people, if they use it, they can take it to the bank because it will hold up. It'll stand the test of any kind of assault. An American is a person who practices justice. Now, what is justice? Justice means guaranteeing that no person is mistreated. That's part one. And number two, guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Now, I gave those two words, American and justice, the definitions, the only definitions that are logical, in my opinion. Now, if someone comes up with a definition of American and a definition of justice is any better, I'll adopt it immediately. But I haven't heard anybody do that yet, because I haven't even heard anybody who's even attempted seriously to define what an American is and what an American isn't, including, I guess, dozens and dozens of scholars and professors and academians, or whatever name you want to give the person, or just average people. But everybody talks about America did this and America did that. Well, who are you talking about? We don't even stop. Put on brakes. Slow down. Get definitions for words, every word. Don't just throw them around any kind of old way. American mistreats black people. Well, now, with the definition I gave, that's impossible. You can't mistreat anybody and be an American, period. The minute you mistreat anybody, you do not qualify to be an American. Americans don't mistreat people. According to whom? According to logic. I mean, you can have a name at all, or be associated with anything and mistreat people. If you mistreat people, basically your name is mistreater. That's what you are. You ain't nothing else. Because when you mistreat people, you're mistreating one of the creator of this entire universe. A creators in some people's religions. You are looking at a creation that should be given some type of top priority category. Why? Because a person, any person moving around on this planet called Earth, functions very well in this environment with the tools that he or she has, if he or she chooses to, more than any other creature, an alligator, a bird, a rhinoceros, a monkey, which is pretty close to people, but not that close, because there's a lot of things that people do that monkeys can't do. Even people who look like monkeys, and who are called that. But if they're registered as people, people are a pretty excellent creation. If you look at a person, you're looking at a first-class piece of equipment. So anybody who will mistreat one of these creations does not qualify as an American, flat out. I don't care what they call themselves. They don't qualify for that. So in a system of white supremacy, bottom line, now here's the punchline, and this statement is either true or false. It's impossible for Americans to exist in a system of white supremacy. It can't be done. Why? Because Americans practice justice, and it's impossible to practice justice in a system of white supremacy. That's the equation. And I stick by it. I'll go to anybody's Supreme Court at any time, or anybody can, who is just listening to what I'm saying, if they take that into court. No way you're going to lose the case. No way you're going to lose the case with those definitions. That's impossible. And you'll be telling the truth, probably for the first time in anybody's court. I'll try it. I mean, why put something out on air like I'm doing this evening? Here in 2016, this is volatile. It's talking about racism. It's getting to be. Put something out there that will not stand every test that you put it to, logically speaking. Now, if you're not going to use logic, then it's all down the hill anyway. If everybody's just going to get into a shouting match and arguments, throwing words around that just with no meaning to half of them or a quarter of them or any of them, because every word has a meaning, and that meaning must be clear. So that's why, starting this program, we started out talking about something called critical race theory, and the person that came up with it, and all like that. So they presented it, and so the person who presented it now has a duty to explain every word in what it is, and every word in what it isn't. But I'm saying I have written a book that I think anybody can take into any college setting, even though I say it's one of the worst put-together books ever. The book that I have written.
Yeah, hold that thought right there, Neely Fuller Jr. Folks, raise your hand. Class is in session. Neely Fuller Jr. is the professor. Reach out to us at 800-450-7876, and we'll take your calls after this quick break on FM 95.9 and AM 1450 WOL, where information is power.
Hey family, for years I've been telling you about my friends at TaxBiz USA. TaxBiz USA is a minority-owned, Christian-based tax resolution firm located right here in the DMV. They live, work, and worship in our community. Congress has allocated millions of dollars to hire IRS agents to aggressively collect your money. You need a guardian to protect and represent you. TaxBiz USA's motto is, we are in the tax resolution business, not client retention business. Unlike those other tax companies who promises to give you a fresh start and all you end up with is a stale finish, TaxBiz USA promises to find a solution to your case within 30 days, not months or even years. Don't wait for the IRS to ruin your life. Call TaxBiz USA right now at 240-493-4800. 240-493-4822. That number again is 240-493-4822. Or visit TaxBiz USA at taxbizusa.com. That's taxbizusa.com. What are you waiting for? Call TaxBiz USA right now, 240-493-4822, and tell them Cheryl sent you.
Power your passions for less during Dell's exceptional Black Friday in July event. Enjoy up to $400 off high-performance Dell XPS laptops and desktops, along with next-level Alienware systems, all powered by Intel Core processors. Shop special prices on stunning Dell monitors, top brand electronics and accessories, plus enjoy free shipping on everything. Don't forget to ask for Intel when you call 800 by Dell. That's 800 by Dell.
Coping 19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad
Listen
Council.
to the Carl Nelson Show on Alexa.
And thanks for rolling with us, folks. I guess this Neely Fuller Jr. is in our classroom this afternoon, and I got to remind you, you got to listen very, very carefully. A lot of things may go over your head. You don't get it, but don't be embarrassed. I didn't get it the first time I heard about racism, white supremacy. Raise your hand by dialing us up at 800-450-7876. On line 2, China's calling us. China, you in Minneapolis? Is China there on line 2? I'm not hearing China. All right, let's go to line 3 then. Anthony in D.C. Anthony? China's not, she's not saying anything. Anthony in D.C.
Yes, Mr. Fuller, it's a pleasure to talk to you and Carl. My question is this, about critical race theory. When Carl read the definition, I think I have no problem with the people of color, but the only thing I have a problem, because I've seen a lot of scholars who say they support critical race theory, they want to include the LGBT. And I'm not against them, but I'm just saying, should that be included in critical race theory, your sexual preference and stuff, when you talk about racism, white supremacy, knowing that kind of is lifestyle supports kind of like, I hate to say it, but kind of self-genocide because you're not reproducing.
The code says, like I've been saying since this program this evening began, start with definitions. I don't really know what LGBTQ means. I wrote it down a long time ago. Let's see where I have it here. But yeah, when it started out, it was something called gay.
Mm-hmm.
So I immediately raised the question. I said, "What do you mean by gay?" I've seen a lot of movie titles and whatnot. Gay divorcee, gay Paris, talking about a whole city. Meaning Paris. I'm going to gay Paris. This summer. Gay Paris. What's gay about Paris? And what do you mean by gay? I know what Paris is. It's a city. I don't know what the word Paris itself means, but I'm quite sure it has a root meaning. But gay usually means happy. See, They say, well, no, Fuller. Gay just don't mean happy. All right. Whole lot of people who are gay ain't happy. All right. Mm-hmm. No, gay means something else. So I asked the next logical question. Something else like what? Now, usually I get no answer. All right. And then I started asking, okay, well, what's the difference between gay and bi? Well, this and that and whatnot. And after they talked for about a half an hour, I say, you know what? I haven't learned nothing. I ain't got no idea what you're talking about. So you got to know when people are answering your questions and when they're not. And I have to say it, black people have a terrible habit that the white supremacists take full advantage of thinking that they have gotten an answer to a question when they really haven't gotten an answer at all. See, so before I can even get into this gay, transgender, all of that, I have to have definitions. And when I say definitions, I want details. Because I spoke at a church here in Northwest Washington some years ago. And they started talking about it. Somebody who was, in the discussion, young Baptist preachers started saying that, a couple of white men had moved into the neighborhood across the street, and that they were coming over and they wanted to participate. And so I asked, okay, well, wait a minute. Participate in what? In order to accomplish what? Because, see, these are the kind of questions you ask when you are having what you call a counter-racist code. I mean, you might have 10 million questions about just one thing. I mean, 10 million questions. Until when? Until you have all questions answered. You don't leave no question unanswered. So on that particular occasion, I said, well, they say they want to participate. Participate in what? Say working with youth. I say working with youth. That's an answer to a question. Doing what? What youth? What are you going to be doing while you're working? What do you mean by working? Two white men all of a sudden want to come over here and work specifically with black youth? Working, doing what? You know, and don't move to that second question until you get the first question answered. And so the the preachers there, black, I mean, you know, they said, well, you know, we don't know about that and whatnot. I said, well, I think you should ask, since you invited me to talk here, everything about codification, counter-racist science, is about questions and answers. Everything. And when I say questions and answers, I mean questions and answers. Questions and answers. And move on to the next question and get an answer to that. And the next one, 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 until every question is answered. And I said, and a major question I want to know is, if they say that they're so-called gay, have them demonstrate what they're talking about, that they're going to be leading these black people into something that they need to know. And they said, actually do that? I said, what did I say? I trip over words. I said, yes, ask them up front. What are you talking about work with? What are you talking about, sir? I said, be polite, always be polite, but you just want to know what they're going to do. And then the bottom line is you want to know what the constructive results are going to be.
Yes.
That's in everything. Those two words will show up in everything in what I have written. Constructive results.
Wonderful.
Constructive results. Everything that every move makes, any creature that moves, everything is all about constructive results. Underline constructive and underline results.
You follow, Anthony?
Yeah, and the second question I was like quick. I think, Mr. Fuller, do you agree with me? The reason why white people don't want critical race theory because the wound is going to be taken off and all the atrocities and the major crimes that they've committed against people of color, especially black Americans, is going to be shown to the world and their kids, and they can't take it. Y'all have a good day. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Well, I kind of missed what the comment that the person made, because right away that bell went off when I heard the word American. I mean, I'm just scared that way now. Man, I've seen the word American used. I mean, there's all kinds of ways. I mean, it's bouncing all over the place. No wonder we have so much confusion. But I have said repeatedly, never talk about American within the same context of racism. Or even as a person, it's not American. It's an idea. It's the most wonderful idea ever thought up among people that people need. And so is the word African, and so is the word Asian. But none of these people exist. That's the point that I'm making. Asians don't exist. Africans don't exist. And Americans don't exist. Why? Because they all have the same definition, logically speaking. And that is people. That's who they are. Asians are people. Africans are people. Americans are people. People who do what? They practice justice. That's what. And since, like I said before, it's impossible for anybody to practice justice in the system of white supremacy, which is the dominant system of government among the people of planet Earth in 2021. Now, I either made a true statement or a false one. I said the system of white supremacy is the only government that really counts among the people of this planet, the entire planet. Not something called, the Western Hemisphere or the Southern Hemisphere or over here, over there, or in Madagascar. They got some racism there. They got a little bit of racism in England. They got a little less racism and a little more racism maybe in South Africa. That kind of talk makes no sense at all. Talking about a little bit of racism is like talking about a little bit of cyanide. I mean, if you got a little bit of it, you got a whole lot of it. And that's the truth. Ain't no such thing as a little bit of racism here and a little bit there. It's either all or nothing at all. That's the way it works. It's either a system or it isn't. According to who? Neely Fuller? No. Evidence. Logic. That's all you got to do. You don't have to get into a shouting match with anybody. I can tell anybody to take the books that I've written, cold turkey, and just take them into any school or any place where they're talking, because that's what I do. Any place where people are talking about race or racism or countries or anything even remotely connected with racism, and everything is not remotely connected with racism, but solidly connected with racism, according to evidence. That's what we mean by white supremacy. It permeates all areas of activity, everywhere, 24/7. There's no let-up in economics, in education, in entertainment, in labor, in law.
All right, hold that thought right there, Neely Fuller Jr. We've got to take a short break, and we've got a bunch of folks from across the country who want to speak with you. Raise a question. The classroom session is started. 800-450-7876. Get your questions answered right here on FM 95.9 and AM 1450. WOL, where information is power. Open phone Friday. We start at 4 o'clock right here on FM 95.9 and AM 1450 WOL. Again, you've got to listen very, very keenly because Neely Fuller Jr. uses logic. Those of you who've taken logic in college understand to prove his points. As mentioned, a bunch of folks want to speak to him, so just make your questions succinctly and we'll get some answers here. Everybody's here to learn. 800-450-7876, including Neely Fuller Jr. Let's go to Anthony in Nashville. He's on line 2. Anthony, your question for Neely Fuller Jr.
Yes, Mr. Neely Fuller. So, I've been noticing that these advertisements have been showing a lot of black people, but knowing that the companies who advertise, majority of these companies are owned by white people. So I just want to know what do you think what do you think the white supremacists are trying to portray when they put non-whites on advertisements?
Oh, it's to show that's what you call showcasing. I talk about that in the book. That's what you call that's one of the white supremacists' main strategies now is racial showcasing. It's about 6 strategies. I have them listed in the textbook for victims of white supremacy. And racial showcases mean all black faces down front. See, back in the days when I was coming along, many decades ago, back of the bus, black people to the back, black people up there in the crow's nest, black people in a separate theater, in a rundown place on the rundown side of town. In other words, black people to the back in a railroad car, put that railroad car in the back so that the white people up front in the railroad cars will feel better about themselves. Be real sensitive about white people's feelings. You know, you don't want that railroad car to be up there in front. But, you know, some practical things, some things didn't even make sense and weren't even practical. Because, for one thing, the railroad cars up front are the ones that caught the smoke in those old engines like they had many years ago. But that's another story. But in answer to the question, showcasing, that's what it is. That's a term that I made up, racial showcasing. Black people down front now. It's been that way since the 1960s. They saw the black people riding in the streets and say, we are men and we want our freedom and we want this and we want that. Say, okay, you're tired of being at the back of everything and being looked down on from the back. We'll just put you up front. And they winked at each other. The white supremacists did, because they say, it doesn't make any difference whether they're at the front or at the back. As long as we are running everything, say, but they're too dumb to know the difference. Because we're dealing with dumb people. That's why we took them over. That's why we have always been their rulers. They're basically dumb. They think like children. That's why we call them boys and girls, all right? Because, they're nothing but a bunch of kids, So we treat them like that. But nowadays, we're going to be refined with it. And so we'll put them all black faces to the front, just like on a stage, just like you're going to, have people playing different parts on a stage, because that's what they're doing now on TV and everything. Put those black people right up front. You got some advertisements? I mean, hey, go and grab any black person you see right there on the street and tell them to come in the studio right now, and then rush them right to the front in this advertisement we got, and have them grinning and tap dancing, usually have them dancing, doing some kind of dance, because they go for that right quick, because that's all we let them do anyway, just jump up and down, spin around on their heads and things like that. Just tell them, just do something like that, and we'll film it, and, and then we'll advertise some medicine we're going to give them that's going to poison them to death and whatnot. They'll all buy it, because they buy anything that's well advertised, because they want to be, we got their minds trained that if it's something that's real popular and we make it popular, it's something you got to have, all right? And we'll say this is something that black people got to have. We'll even say that, all right? This is something that makes black people much better than what they are. And they'll go out and buy it, because they're brick dumb. They're just like animals, which is what they are, like the guy said in The Godfather. We'll sell them drugs. They'll buy it. Why? Because we're selling it to them. They'll buy anything that we sell it, as long as we make it look like it's got something to it. They'll grab it in a minute, because they're so desperate to be noticed. See, black people love to be noticed. I mean, the way they dress, the way they act, the way they walk down the middle of the street and whatnot. I mean, and dare anybody to hit them. I mean, hey, that's all about being noticed. So we'll exploit this need that they have, this burning need. Somebody pay attention to me. Say, we got them that way all over the world. And as long as we got them that way, it's like training a dog. You train dogs to do things that you want done. But you make them think that they are doing it on their own. And they'll just grin from ear to ear. And we'll just laugh at them all the way to the bank.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. 800-450-7876. Line 4, Charles III in D.C. Charles?
Hey, Brother Carl. After hearing that answer, man, just give me a second. Okay, Mr. Fuller, that was deep. I got two questions for you, Mr. Fuller. Bill Cosby was released last week, and when he was released, I noticed you got black men and black women debating. You got a black institution admonishing a black woman, and then you got black people attacking a black institution. Now, is this an example of the white supremacists creating chaos and then just stepping back and observing us?
Absolutely. See, the key to controlling people is to cause all kinds of confusion nonstop. Anytime you can go into a room full of people and you're the person who causes a bunch of confusion, you are powerful. You're the most powerful person in that room. Why? Because everybody else is confused and you're not. Because you started the confusion. Anybody who knows that, any trickster knows that. The best tricksters in the world are the ones who cause confusion. The one who gets in a crowd of people and throws a rock and ducks behind the hedges. And all those people start fighting each other because they don't know where the rock came from. And the person who threw the rock is doing what? They're just rolling around on the grass laughing like you wouldn't believe. The white supremacists pulled that one all over the world and have been for centuries. And they get away with it because even the best of us do not understand what they're doing. The smartest of us. See, they got a whole system well thought out. The most well thought out system for controlling people ever is that thing called the system of white supremacy. It's well thought out. They don't do nothing sloppy. Every now and then they make mistakes, just like, going to the moon. You make mistakes. But you minimize your mistakes by doing what? Correcting your mistakes immediately. Black people are trained to keep making the same mistakes over and over again, which is what we do beautifully. Black people, if you look at us, we make the same mistakes the same way over and over and over and over again because we are trained to do that. Trained by whom? Our masters. See, we haven't had but one real trainer. Black people don't train each other. We ain't got nothing to train each other with. I came into the world under the system of white supremacy. The people that I call my parents are not my real parents. The white supremacists are my parents. Because anybody who feeds and clothes that way, but that's the way it is. So I was born in captivity. Every black person on this planet was born in captivity and has never been released from that captivity. So we don't know anything very much except this prison system called the system of white supremacy.
Okay, Mr.
Prison system in the world.
Okay, Mr. Fuller. That segues into my final question. Carl had Bill Cosby's PR guy on a week ago from tomorrow. And he had mentioned how none of the people in the entertainment got involved to defend Mr. Cosby, and even they said they wanted to, but they were afraid, and even some of the civil rights workers, people, they were afraid because their situation would be affected. Now, is this, again, an example when you like to say we're not men, but we're boys? Is that an example of being a boy where you're afraid to speak up?
Absolutely. When you grow into what they call real manhood, and that's all relative, comparative, all right, it means you are a problem solver. Black people do not have a reputation worldwide of being problem solvers. Why? Since the system of white supremacy, at least, we're not in a position to solve problems. The white supremacists put us in position to make problems, and we make plenty of them because that's the position they allow us to be in. So we got all kinds of problems. But when it comes to problem solving, just bring in 2 or 3 white people among 50 million black people, and you got more problem solvers there who are white than you have all of those 50 million black people put together. And that's the truth. And that's been proven over and over again. Why? Because black people are born in captivity. We are subject to the system of white supremacy. Now, the white supremacists will hear me say that, and if they say anything at all, which they don't, because white people don't even talk to me.
Hold that thought right there, Neely Fuller
They'll
Jr.
talk
We got to take a
everybody.
quick break, and we'll pick up on that on the other side. Charles, I thank you for your call. 800-450-7876 to speak to Neely Fuller Jr. Your call's next, right here on FM 95.9 and AM 1450. WOL, where information is power. All right. Folks, our guest, our teacher is Neely Fuller Jr., Professor Fuller, 800-450-7876 to speak to him. You just raise your hand by dialing those numbers. And I got to tell you again, you got to listen very, very keenly to what he's saying because he uses logic to prove his points. You got to listen keenly. You may get it after a while, and you may miss it, but just keep listening very, very keenly. You can't be doing something else. This is a serious course right here on racism, white supremacy, how the system works. So, Neely Fuller Jr., I'll let you finish responding to Charles's question because I know we interrupted you before the top of the hour.
That was just about it. That, the show-offism and whatnot, and also the last part of the question, that if I remember it correctly, sometimes I lose my point, and people have detected that for sure, because that's true. And so...
he was talking about Bill Cosby and some of the Bill Cosby's PR guys.
The only thing you can say about that is he is subject to the system of white supremacy, so you can expect anything that is what we might call ugly to be associated with any person who is subject to the system of white supremacy. Because when it comes to people of color, ugliness, ugly behavior, ugly whatever, everything that's ugly, everything that's incorrect, everything that's poisonous, black people have to be right in the forefront of it in the system of white supremacy. This is what makes the white supremacists feel wonderful about themselves, because they planted the poison. Them. They believe in death. They worship death. That's why murder mystery novels, I've said this many times before, over and over again. You can flip on the TV at 3 o'clock in the morning, sneak up on the TV and flip it on, and just start flipping channels and see how many times you see the word murder or murder mystery or some type of killing or somebody stabbing somebody. And then start talking about civilization. They got to be kidding. Anytime you even present that type of idea in a form that's supposed to be fun, and then teach it to your subjects, like black people, which is why black people glorify death. We care more about funeral homes than we care about anything. Funeral home and the church that takes you there are the fanciest places in any town when it comes to black people. That ain't natural. Particularly the funeral home. But that's the cathedral. It's a part of it. Black people show up at funerals when they don't show up for nothing else. Death worship. For trying to keep somebody alive, go to medical school or something like that. Oh, no. No. But stand in the rain if somebody's dead and put your arms around everybody and all like that. See, and where do we get that? From the white supremacists. Because they worship death. Celebrating things like what? Halloween. Skeletons. Hanging. Black people shouldn't want to be around nowhere where anybody's hanging anything, even a curtain. I mean, with the kind of way that we've been hung. But we even use it in our expressions, man. Hey, man, I'm just hanging. You just what? I hope not. That's all we've been doing for like forever, thousands of years, hanging. We shouldn't even want to hang a curtain. But see, we don't pay attention to details. Codification, counter-racist science is about details. That's the one thing that's missing in the black psyche. Details. We just grab stuff because it's in a pretty box. And so the white supremacists know how to make pretty boxes. And so we call our jail cells. I mean, that's a pretty box. We put a new coat of paint in here, and I'm happy. All right? They didn't paint that other guy's cell, but they painted mine. So that makes me feel better. Man, you're in a jail cell. I don't care what color it is. You're in a jail cell. Why don't you think about getting out of here rather than comparing yourself to some other black guy that's in the cell block, getting even with him? Always want to be doing better than him. That's what you measure by? And all black people are in that type of POW camp. We measure everything by each other. Black people watch each other more than they watch anything on earth. And we measure everything by what another black person is doing. And we pay absolutely no attention to the people who are running all our business, who are the white supremacists of this planet. No attention at all. Pass by white supremacists on the street every day and don't even see them. But we see a black person 6 blocks away. And when we get close enough to them, want to start a fight. Many of us.
And why is that?
You don't notice the white people at all.
And why is that, Neely Fuller? Why is that?
We've been trained that way. It's not our fault. When you come out of the womb, and everything that you get is a straight dose of white supremacy from that moment, what would you know by the time you get to be 40 years old except white supremacy? That's all you've been getting a straight dose of. Elementary school and everything. That's why this lady, who is now so controversial in the school systems, you know, they say, you're teaching this stuff to white children and whatnot. We're not going to have it. And, man, they are serious, too. They are serious. They are serious. Say, no, you're going too far now. We don't mind marching with you for 2 or 3 nights, throw a few fire bombs, even jump on a few white people who live next door to us. I mean, we'll kiss and make up and have a barbecue, I mean, you know, next week anyway, you know, because we fight, you know, just like mobsters do. We run a gangster operation called the System of White Supremacy. Gangsters fall out. But like Clemenza in Godfather 1, he says, we go through this every 10, 15 years. Michael, you know, we kill each other, slaughter each other, but we kiss and make up. After 10 or 15 years, and everything gets quiet until the next 10 or 15 years. Over what? Over who's going to handle those black people up there with their ignorant selves up in Harlem. That's what it's all about. We fight each other about them. We fight so-called civil wars. That's why we give it that name. War is war. No such thing as a civil war. Never has been. But they call it that because it's supposed to be, hey, just a falling out among friends. But we don't stay falling out with each other. See, that's the difference. See, it's not permanent. When the black people come around, we band together right quick. That's all, you know, hey, all that changes right quick. Uh-oh, we got some black people coming down the road now. You know, let's stop this fighting, this little friendly fight that we're having. Because they love fighting, you know, even when there's nobody to fight. Even General Patton said, hey, you know, they're not going to let me in on the fight. Eisenhower, he's taking all the glory and whatnot. I got to get in on this fight, even if I get in on the tail end of it. You ain't going to keep General Patton out of no fight. I'm General Patton. I'm George. You know, and then after we fight these Germans, we got the Russians on our side fighting the Germans. I want to fight them Russians. See, that's the white supremacist mentality, folks. We've got to understand what we're dealing with. But we haven't even scratched the surface of understanding the system of white supremacy, what it is, and how it works. And if you don't understand that, everything else that you understand is guaranteed to confuse you. And we are the most confused people on the planet.
All right, hold that thought there. 800-450-7876. Victor is in Toronto, Canada. He's on line 5. Victor, you're on with Neely Fuller Jr.
Oh, hi. I have two questions. I wanted to ask Mr. Fuller, why is it important for victims of racism to expect to be mistreated?
Because we're in the system of white supremacy. We're not in any other government. We're not in an American government. That's something we aspire to be, and we should. Every person on the planet, white and non-white, should want to be what? An American, an African, and an Asian. Why? Why should every person on this planet, I'm making a flat statement now, should do everything that he or she can to be an American, an African, and an Asian? All three of them. I call it the 3 A's. Why? Why should we aspire to be that? Look forward to being that. Work toward being that. An American, and an African, and an Asian. Why? Because they are people that do one thing. Along with all the other things they do this one thing for sure. They practice justice. But nobody is an African, an American, or an Asian in the system of white supremacy because that's impossible.
Hold that thought right there, Neely. We got to take a short break. I'll let you finish your response to Victor in Toronto. 800-450-7876. You too can join the classroom and raise your question by dialing those numbers. And we'll take your calls after this short break right here on FM 95.9 and AM 1450. WOL, where information is power. So we're in the classroom again, and the professor is Neely Fuller Jr. You got a question, raise your hand by dialing 800-450-7876. Before we left, Neely was responding to Victor's question out of Toronto, Canada. So Neely Fuller Jr., I'm going to let you finish your response.
Yes, and that's what people should aspire to be. But we are subject to the system of white supremacy, and nobody can practice justice. Africans, Americans, and Asians are people who practice justice. They don't exist because justice doesn't exist. What is justice? Guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help in all areas of activity. Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Everything constructive. Nothing non-constructive, not for 5 minutes. Otherwise, you don't have justice, all right? And you can't have justice in a system of white supremacy. That's impossible. So it's impossible for anybody to qualify for the title of American, African, or Asian in the system of white supremacy. It doesn't compute. It's not logical. I don't care what scientists or social scientists or any people, a gathering of people, there's no way you can argue against that because you'll be arguing against logic. You can't argue against mathematics. See, these words like American, African, and Asian, they're just tools. They're words. So it comes down to what do these words mean? And anybody will tell you that an American is something that everybody wants to be. And then you'll have other people who will say, oh, an African, if you're a real African, you're something to be proud of. And anybody who is Asian say, oh, yes, I'm a proud Asian. Well, the question is now, what makes you an Asian? What makes you an Asian? You said you're a proud Asian. What makes you an Asian? I'm just throwing this out as an example. These are questions you can ask because, see, when people say things, go into the question mode. And don't try to help with the answer. Just keep asking questions because questions and answers are universal law. Says that questions and answers would always take everybody right where they should be. It won't take everybody where they want to be, but it'll take everybody where they should be. But you have to ask enough questions and get enough answers. So if a person says they are a proud Asian or an African or an American, you say, oh, that's what you say you are? Now, explain what that means. First of all, by what is an American, what is an African, and what is an Asian. And so after maybe about 16 hours of talk, you might say, well, an American, you know, is a nice person. Oh, okay, let's keep going. What do you mean by nice? Okay, just keep on going. Keep on going. Do Americans practice justice? Oh, yes. Americans believe in justice. Hey, that's not what I asked. That's not what I asked. Do Americans practice justice? Oh, yeah. Well, if you're going to qualify to be an American, you got to practice justice. Mm-hmm. All right. Are you an American? I'm waiting. I don't care if it takes 16 weeks. I ain't moving to the second question until you answer that question. Now, you started off by making a statement. You said you were an American. Then you made another statement. Americans practice justice. So I asked you a question. Do you practice justice? Meaning guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help without fail all the time. That's the qualification for being an American. Now, I'm going to ask again, are you an American, sir or ma'am? Always be polite, always be courteous, don't be hostile. It doesn't call for that. You don't need that. All you need is to keep asking questions and getting answers. And don't help with the answers. Most people have a great temptation to jump in and help with the answers. You don't do that. Because now you're going to get an argument once you start doing that. And the code says, logic says, arguments don't do anything but lead to more arguments. And then arguments are designed to produce nothing but arguments that you can either win or lose. But a conversation, by its nature, by its logic, every conversation does what? Solves a problem. That's what every conversation is supposed to do. Otherwise, you're not supposed to be having no conversations. If you're not talking to someone that in a way that solves a problem, small or big, you're not really having a conversation. It's either empty talk or it's an argument. And neither one of them are worth anything. Arguments and empty talk. Black people should be famous by now. But when they open their mouths to say anything, you learn something you can use that produces what? A constructive result. That's what. Don't ever forget those two words, constructive results. Every move that every creature makes is supposed to produce a constructive result. I don't care what you start out to do. The result is always supposed to be constructive. Who qualifies for that? Nobody on this planet. So therefore, nobody's qualified to be an American or an African or an Asian. Because these are three categories of the same people because they do what? Produce constructive results in every move they make. It's a goal worth trying to reach. And in the textbook for victims of white supremacy, I call it universal man, universal woman. Why? We're in the universe. You just don't compare yourself with what the person next door is doing. talking about my house is prettier than yours. That's real narrow, stupid thinking. You compare yourself with everything in the universe, all the trillions of stars out there. Compare yourself with that and ask yourself, how much do you know about every speck of dust on every one of them? Every speck of dust on every star that's in the sky. Start with that. And you'll be on the way to thinking like a universal man and or a universal woman. According to what? Neely Fuller? No. According to logic. You're in the universe. Logic says you should be universal in your thinking and in your actions. Stop being so petty. My shoes look better than yours. That's about as low as you can get on the order of thinking in a way that produces what? Constructive results. That's what.
Victor, you still with us? Victor in Toronto? I think he hung up. All right, 800-450-7876. Ed's in Chicago. He's on line too. Ed, you have a question for Neely Fuller Jr.?
Yes, hi, Carl and Mr. Fuller. I'm definitely learning. I appreciate all of your messages. Just a quick. So, does the system of white supremacy, is that particular to people, or does that have control over nature and the earth as well? Does that system also work as it relates to nature?
Oh, I put it in the book, the environment. That's what you're talking about. Yes. See, if you can control the environment that people are in, and what do you mean by environment? That's another word. It means wherever people are situated. So if you can control the water and the air and the things that people use in whatever environment they're in, you control the people. But the short way around is control a person's mind. The white supremacists are experts at that. See, they don't pay any attention to the environment where they go. If it's people there, they pay attention to the people. They study the people immediately. I mean, the minute they lay eyes on them, they study those people to the nth degree. They learn what will make you laugh. They learn what will make you cry. They learn everything that there is about you, but they let you know very little about themselves, except what they want you to know. And they have found that black people are very garrulous people, garrulous meaning like to talk a lot, tell everything, all right? So the white supremacists encourage that because it makes a black person think, oh, here's a white person and listen to me? I must be very smart. If I got a white person listening to what I have to say, well, if that white person is a white supremacist, that's a technique, a very strategic one, because what they are doing is learning everything about you, and the only thing you know about them at the end of the week, after you get through talking about yourself, the only thing you know about them is zero, except they wanted answers from you, and you gave them all the answers. Sit down here, Chief. Talk to me. You got all those feathers on your head? I mean, you're a big man. Oh, boy. You can teach me a lot, Chief. Let's sit down here. Have a swig of this while we're talking here. You know, I got some fire water here. You're used to this plain water. This water got fire in it. Chief, you do appreciate fire, don't you? Fire, water. You appreciate the environment, nature. And the chief says, yes, I appreciate, I appreciate everything in nature. I know you do, Chief. You're a smart man. Oh, you're smart. Oh, I just love being around you. I can hardly stand it. I mean, you're so brainy. Tell me more. Tell me more about your people. Tell me more about your women and how you relate to them. Because I want to relate to them in a way that you think that everybody should relate to them. And I want to relate.
Hold that thought right there, because we're going to take a quick break. 800-450-7876. Get you in. Your call's next on FM 95.9 and AM 1450. WOL, where information is power.
I'm Allison Felix, mother, activist, and Olympic athlete. As a child, I remember sitting with my mom while she did my hair and told me stories. Those were some of my favorite memories. Now, I get to carry that same tradition with my daughter Cameron. To get it right, I turn to the experts at Gold Series from Pantene. Developed by Black scientists, Gold Series moisturizes, protects, and strengthens our hair. Gold Series from Pantene. It works better because it's made better.
You're ready to get out and get moving. And whether it's surfing, playing tennis, or hiking every path you can find, you're going to need some essential new gear. Essentials that are even more rewarding with the Bank of America customized cash rewards credit card. You can choose to earn 3% cash back on online shopping, which could increase to 5.25% as a preferred rewards member. Visit bankofamerica.com/more rewarding and apply now. The essentials have never felt more rewarding. Copyright 2021 Bank of America Corporation.
The future depends on teachers. Every day,
Listen to the Carl Nelson Show on Alexa.
Thanks for staying with us, folks. Our guest is Neely Fuller Jr. The classroom is full. Call a friend and get the last 30 minutes right here on FM 95.9 and AM 1450. Victor is back. Victor's in Toronto. Victor, you had a second question for Neely Fuller Jr.? Is Victor there on line 3? Victor on line 3. All right, there he is.
Hi, Carl. I just wanted to follow up with Mr. Fuller. When I asked him about the question about why should Black people expect to be mistreated, I just wanted to know how should I think about being in the system. So if I expect to be mistreated, then I won't get angry. I won't get sad. I'll just say that this is what the system does, and this is why it needs to be replaced by justice. So that's what I was kind of getting at, Mr. Fuller. Does that make sense?
That's a correct analysis. The system of white supremacy is set up for what? It's set up to dominate and mistreat people. That's why it's called white supremacy. Based on what? Based on the non-color, white, and the people who are called by the white supremacists of color. See, they gave us these designations. Black people said, black people identify themselves, like I identify myself many times, as a member of a race. But why do I do that? I never joined a race, really. But I was told, because I'm in a prison camp called the System of White Supremacy, and my prison masters, who are the white supremacists, say, you are a member of the black race. Repeat after me. And so I repeated, because I was born in their prison camp. And their prison camp is the entire planet. Okay? I was born in the planet because they have control over me wherever. It doesn't make any difference where I go. It's the white supremacists that really tell me what to do and what not to do and what I'd better not do or even think. They allow me to go here and go there in the second area of activity, like a school, and they say what's going to be taught, and it's to glorify them. So what is the purpose of the system of white supremacy? That's a question. It's to dominate and mistreat people of color in order to accomplish what? Another question. What everybody wants: fun, glory, and material comfort. Those three things. Every alligator wants that. Fun, glory, material comfort. When you watch squirrels in the park, just by watching them, you say those squirrels are chasing each other. They're having what? Fun. They're not trying to harm each other. They're running around the tree in a circle. Many people have seen them do that. Okay? That's fun. And they're getting glory out of it, meaning they feel good about themselves. Okay? And then the third thing, material comfort. So the white supremacists get fun, they get glory, and they get material comfort out of dominating and mistreating people of color. And it's just that simple. You know, it's not even personal. It's business. Because they get those three things that all creatures want. And they'll find an easy way to do it. They fought among themselves trying to get the same thing, but it wasn't working very well. But once they discovered people of color all over the world and figured how easy it was to brainwash them and take them over and have them always fighting among themselves and whatnot while they grab everything while the fight's going on, okay? And they found out how easy that was. They said, oh, boy, we got something. This is a gold mine, you know? Well, what are we going to call it? We'll just call it, hey, white supremacy, because that's what it is, you know? But now they're...
Let me interrupt you and ask you this, though, Neely Fuller, because you just mentioned, and thank you, Victor, for your call. You mentioned the fighting amongst each other. That seems to be predominant now. You know, we keep talking about unity and how we're going to get together. It seems like the opposite. Why are we continually just fighting against each other?
You mean black people?
Yes, sir.
Yes. The reason they are doing that is because it's scary. See, we were talking about Black Lives Matter just a few months ago, and it was getting too close to really talking about where we are now, dangerously close to being serious about this thing that the textbook for victims of racism that I wrote called the system of white supremacy. You start hearing this term systemic racism for the first time over and over again. But I say, hey, that's not close enough. Call it the system of white supremacy. That's more explicit. Now, we haven't reached there yet. But you let some of these black people start going in these colleges and whatnot and say in capital letters, the system of white supremacy / racism. Racism is white supremacy is racism. And in answer to your question, sir, that's why we're turning on each other. Because when the going gets hot, we have always done that. Right after the riots of the 1960s, black people immediately, when they saw how despairing everything was and how much we wasn't gaining from it, looking at all the ashes and this begging white people, please, sir, where can I go and get some milk? I mean, my grandmother's sick. She needs some milk and she needs some bread. I got to walk 16 blocks now because here in the black neighborhood, I mean, everything is just all burned out. I mean, and the white people say, well, you all burned it out. I mean, so live with it. Build it up. If you know how to do everything. You're talking about you built the pyramids. Well, build them. All right? I ain't got nothing to do with it. I had the stores here, so you burn it all up. So, hey, live with it. All these old burned out cars, all these vacant lots. So what did we do? We looked at the mess and then started blaming each other without doing it directly, getting mad at each other, getting mad at ourselves because we are helpless, and nobody likes to admit that they're helpless. So what do? What all people do when they feel weak? Turn on anybody who they look like might be a little bit weaker than them. Everybody has that tendency in this system that we have been in on planet Earth. That's kind of been around for like forever. If you perceive yourself as being weak, in answer to the question, so what do? When you feel helpless and you don't know what to do about it because you feel yourself being listed as dumb, you look for a way to look like you're smart. So how do you do that? Look at the person next to you. And the more that person looks like you, the more you hate that person. That's why black people are slaughtering each other by the bushel in Chicago. Because there in Chicago, everything looks like it's all worn out, depressed, got to walk 5 blocks, to get a pint of milk in a store that's practically boarded up. People barricaded in there, and, people cussing the guy out from Pakistan who just got there. He ain't hurting nobody. He's just trying to render a service and feed his family, but everybody's in there stealing from him. You know, mad. In answer to the question, that's why we do it. See, we're the craziest people on planet Earth because we've been made the craziest people on planet Earth, secondary crazy. Now, the actual craziest people on the planet Earth are the white supremacists because they're the smartest people on the planet, and they should know better. So when you are smart, but you're not doing smart things by people, like treating people the way people should be treated, like practicing justice, then you are insane, and you're driving everybody else insane. And we should say that in one voice to every white supremacist walking the face of the earth.
All right. 800-450-7876. Thank you, Victor. Let's go to Chicago. You mentioned Chicago. Ed's waiting for us. He's on line 2. Ed, you're on with Neely Fuller Jr. Is Ed there on line 2? I'm not hearing Ed. All right. He's not responding, though. So, okay, we'll just have to move on. Neely Fuller Jr., you once told us that we talk too much as black folks. We never have these, we don't have these conversations that we should generally have. We just have a lot of talk, nonsense. Can you explain that to the audience?
Well, we actually don't talk too much. It's just what we say when we do talk. We talk what we call ghetto talk, and we brag about it. But it's nothing in ghetto talk that produces constructive results. See, here again, those two words. You always come to that. What's the constructive result? All the barbershop talk and whatnot. Okay, so y'all did all this talking. I mean, you got about 5 preachers in here, and they reading from the Bible and all like that. What's the result? What's the result, Reverend? What's the result? Homeboy. What's the result of all of this talk we do here in this counsel shop? You come to the barber shop to get counseling. Okay, so I got this information. What am I going to do with it? See, that's what we're not centering on. Constructive results. We figure that if we won an argument with somebody else in the barbershop, man, we have conquered the world. We walk out of there pleased. Man, I'll talk to everybody in there. Man, I can rap. They can't rap no better than me. And that's our whole world.
Yeah. Hold that thought right there, Neely Fuller. We got to take a quick break, and I'll let you finish that response on the other side. We still got some folks who want to talk to you. 800-450-7876 gets you in. Your call's next on FM 95.9 and AM 1450. WOL, where information is power.
No matter what we come in for, Target makes it easy to leave with more of what we value. Come in for yoga pants, leave with balance. Come in for healthier snacks, leave feeling more fulfilled.
Reminding tomorrow's Fridays, you all know, and we invite all of you to just free your mind, think for yourself, and join us for another edition of Open Phone Friday. We start right at 4 o'clock on the dot right here on FM 95.9 and AM 1450 WOL. Let's keep moving in the essence of time. China's reaching out to us again in Minnesota. I think we lost it the first time we went to on line 3. China?
Yes, and thank you again, Mr. Carl. This gentleman, Mr. Fuller, you are just, my gosh, you're awesome. Things that you have said, I have thought about, and you're just awesome. And I want to say, when you mentioned about America and justice, and I have been saying for years that I'm not an American, and that justice, when you explained it, and I get it. Because in the American flag, the song, when they say, pledge allegiance, to the flag, United States of America, that and justice for all. That's not, I get it, because it's not true. And they know that it's not true. And I just want to say, because I'm just so overwhelmed, and I thank you. I thank you so much for your knowledge, for your explanation, for your just thank you. And you know what? And it's okay if people disagree with something about some things. That's okay, because the bottom line is you are right. And I thank you so much. And Mr. Carl, I thank you for having him on. Bring him back. Thank you
All right,
so much.
thank you, China. There's another question there, so we're going to keep moving. Angela's on line 4. Angela's calling from the district. Angela?
Hi, Carl and Dr. Fuller.
Yes, you're on the air. You have a question?
Yeah, Dr. Fuller, I respectfully disagree with you in terms of these Europeans being as smart as you say they are, because everything that they obtained was through violence. And they are the most violent and murderous people on the planet. So intelligence is not in the equation, or being smart is not being in the equation. They obtained everything they got through violence. And unfortunately, we are not by nature violent people, but a lot of our people have adopted their ways. And I think that's why a lot of the murders are going on, from us living in the same environment with these people for so long. It has caused us to be like them. And, you know, I just don't agree with them being smart people.
All right, let's give him a chance to respond, because you're starting to repeat yourself. Angela, thank you for your call.
Thanks.
All righty. Thank you. Neely Fuller Jr.?
Now, that's another reason I wrote my book, is to keep black people from letting a difference of opinion cause a problem. See, we're supposed to be problem solvers. So in the book itself, there's something called Victims Guaranteed Qualification. Now, I gave my opinion, which is nothing but opinion. Everything I've been saying on this program, 2 hours, is just an opinion that comes from me. And all opinions from all victims of racism are equal. I'm not saying my opinion is better than anybody else's. And I'm saying that the lady's opinion is what comes under VGQ, Victims Guaranteed Qualification. She's qualified to give her opinion. But I'm not qualified to criticize her opinion, because it doesn't work that way. And the reason it doesn't work that way, the logical reason, is because it doesn't produce what? A constructive result. All that will happen, and anybody who doesn't, everybody's, lots of people have done it. I've done it in the past. That's why I stumbled upon this idea of VGQ, saying it doesn't produce a constructive result. When I disagree with another black person about our condition and how we got in it or anything about it, what is the constructive result with my disagreement? Zero. None. Because the situation is still the same. Why? Because neither one of us control anything anyway under the system of white supremacy. So we can agree or disagree on anything. So what? At the end of the day, we're still prisoners of war. Prisoners of war having a disagreement with each other, both of them sitting there with chains around their ankles, their neck, their hands, and everything, can't do anything without the master's permission, and they having a disagreement, and then going to get in an argument about the disagreement because they have a different point of view on their situation. That's all that really means. Until what? Until one perspective proves itself against the other, meaning both of those people who are having a disagreement are no longer in chains. That's the only test. When you're no longer under the system of white supremacy, then whoever came up with the idea of how to go about doing it, hey, it speaks for itself. Why? because everybody's got ideas, but somebody's idea just might work. So the lady took the position. And I'm saying this for everybody who might take a different position from what I have, and a different position from millions of other people, which is likely to happen. How do you know which position to take? That's going to be the position that produces the end of racism and replacing it with justice. It's when somebody actually does it. That's the only test. There's no other test. Differences of opinion is no test at all. It's just differences of opinion. That's why it should be nobody should fall out with anybody. Any black person talking about racism from any angle should ever have a falling out. Sometimes black people get guns. Because they're talking about the best way to go about keeping white people from doing this or handling white folks. Like that Richard Pryor skit who says, you scared of the white man. I ain't scared of him because I know how to handle him. And he's drinking out of the whiskey bottle. That's why I am where I am today. Okay? But that was his perspective. And you don't laugh at it and you don't criticize it. That's his perspective. He's a fellow victim. So you say, well, I'm laughing at him because he's drunk talking that stuff. You say, well, wait a minute. You ain't drunk, but you're still a victim. So all victims are equal, and their opinions are equal, because they don't amount to nothing until the system of white supremacy has been replaced with the system of justice. And whoever came up with a formula for doing that, hey, that's the winning ticket, because it speaks for itself. That's
all right. Before I take another call for you, can you tell the folks how you can get your book?
Oh, yes, for sure. And I'm more and more now, I'm saying something that I haven't been saying before. I'm saying my book is something that everybody should have. I've never said that before, in the way that I'm saying it now. If I have said it before, I meant it in a much lighter sense, as far as weight is concerned. But right now, I'm putting all kinds of weight on it because the white supremacists are pushing back on just the term system of white supremacy. So that's an indication. Hey, I'm hitting close to home. They went for bigotry, discrimination, all kinds of terms, about a dozen terms, okay? All kinds of slogans that they didn't object to at all. Black people use it. But when you start talking up front, replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. Just say that. And from what I'm seeing, it's that tip of the iceberg. The white supremacists do not want that kind of talk at all, because that goes right to the heart of everything. You can talk about love, you can talk about integration, you can talk about segregation, but if you say just those words, replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. End of story. That's the whole package. You don't need to make a long speech. That's it. Because if you don't do that, you're not doing anything at all. It's just a whole lot of millions of words that's not going to amount to nothing. But that's really what you're talking about. Replacing the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. Everything else falls in place. Now, the white supremacists in any university, in any seminar, on TV, they don't want that kind of talk at all, because that's hitting right close to home. Now, in the textbook for victims of white supremacy, what I'm saying about eliminating the system of white supremacy and replacing it with the system of justice is all through that book. So that's why I'm now saying, take this book to any seminar, any college, don't leave, you might say, use a cliche term, home without it. I'm saying that now, not because it's my book, but because when I wrote this book, I was looking for a book like what I wrote, but nobody was writing anything. And that started in 1957. So I think I know what I'm talking about. I think I know what I'm doing. I've been paying close attention to what everybody's been doing and saying. And I think I've learned a little bit in some 70 years. I'm 91 years old now, and now I'm recommending my book simply because there's a huge vacuum here that we haven't.
Right, and we got about a minute left, so if you can tell us how we can get the book.
Get the book by
Appreciate
going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. Producejustice.com. And everything about getting the book, and in 2 volumes, but get the basic volume, 2016 revised expanded edition, for sure. And even if you don't get the other book, which is a backup book called a word guide, counter-racist word guide, but if you can, get both of them. But I haven't been doing this just to sell books.
Right.
But I see where I got to get this book out here now. So
All right.
It's hot.
Right, it is hot, and we got to leave. But thank you, Neely Fuller Jr. Thank you again for sharing all that information, and thank you for those books as well. Folks are out of here. Stay strong, stay positive. Please stay healthy. We'll see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock right here on FM 95.9 and AM 1450 WOL, where information is power.